Today we're going to talk about different types of graphs. One type of graph is a bar graph. It is used to compare the frequency of data. So for example, it'll have a visually strong. It can compare 2 and 3 sets of data at a time. So over to your right, this is an example of a bar graph. You notice that between the categories at the bottom that there is a space in between each jump. So in the graph to the right, it's asking, what is it displaying? So it's going to be displaying scores on a pretest and on a test. And you can get that from the title. How many points did May's scores improve by? So you come down here. That should be Mary's. So Mary's pretest started at an 80 and then it jumped to a 90. So it improved by 10 points, or 10% actually. Who did not make any improvement? That would be John, because you can notice his pretest and post-test were the same height. What is the highest grade earned on the pretest? So I'm going to look at all the oranges, and I know that's the pretest because if you look at the key says pretest is orange. Or in your case, it'd be the left bar off of each of these because you have black and white sheets. The highest pretest is going to be Mary at 80%. Now let's look at a histogram. A histogram is a graph used to show sets of data. It's not a bar graph, so you can see that there's no spaces now in between each category or each interval. Okay, and you cannot read exact values. So you can see at the bottom of the histogram that it's an interval notation. So scores between 1 and 5, or in this case, the number of runners. So the number of runners between 1 and 5, 6 and 10, 11 and 15. Okay, so the question asks, how many runners were between ages 6 and 10? So I'll go to the 6 and 10 category, and I'll look at the height, and it's going to tell me 30 runners. What age group has the most participation? So I'm going to look at the highest bar, and that's going to be ages 16 to 20. And exactly how many runners were 22 years old? So 22 years old will be in this last category, or this last interval, but you don't have enough information to be able to determine that, because it doesn't break it up specifically by ages in that manner. Now let's look at a line graph. A line graph is used to show how many values change over a period of time. They're used to make future predictions or to see a trend. So in the example to the right, it's talking about potatoes consumed. So it wants to know how many potatoes were consumed on Wednesday. So I'm going to go to Wednesday and look at where my point is. And here it's at 30. What day are the least amount of potatoes consumed? So you want to go to the lowest point of the line graph, and that's going to be on Thursday. And how many kilos of potatoes would you buy if you wanted to have enough of for the whole week? So you would have to go and look at how many that you are going to eat for each day, add them up for the whole week. So in this case, 15 plus 20 plus 30 plus 10 plus 15 plus 30, sorry, plus 25 plus 35. You have to add all those up and you would get a total of 150 kilos of potatoes. Now looking at circle graphs. Circle graphs show how the parts are related to the whole. Very similar to a ratio in that manner, where it's going to be part to whole. It shows the percentage of total for each category. So it's not going to show the amount, it'll show the percentage. So that's something you'll have to learn how to convert. So which music is the most popular? So you want to look at the largest portion of the circle graph, which is going to be rap at 35%. And what would be a good name for this graph? You know, this may be a variety for you guys, but I'm looking at it and it's talking about music. Could say favorite music. What percentage of people don't like classical music? So you're going to have to figure out the total percentage of all of these. So you're going to have to add up all your percentages to get 100%. So if 10% of them like classical, the people that do not like classical are going to be 90%. If there are 400 people surveyed in the graph, how many like alternative music? So in order to figure out the how many people, you want to take your percentage, make it into a decimal, multiply it by your total, and that will give you the how many. So for example, 15% is going to be 15 hundredths times my total of 400 people surveyed. And once you multiply this out, you get 60 people. So 60 people is the same thing as 15% of 400. Turn the page. Let's look at a pictograph. A pictograph uses an icon or pictures to represent the data values. A key must be used to explain what each of these icons are. So for example, it says one teddy bear has a picture of a teddy bear, represents 10 toys. Okay, and that's the first question. One bear represents 10 toys. How would you represent 5 toys? You would have to draw a half of a bear. Who has more toys? Lily, Sarah, Susan, or Sam? So Lily, Sarah, Susan, or Sam. So Lily has 10, 20, 30, 40 toys. Sarah has 10, 20, 30 toys. Susan has 50. And Sam has 10. So that means Susan has the most. A line plot. A line plot can be used frequently. A line plot can be used frequently for data values. It'll show gaps and outliers easier than other graphs. Remember, an outlier is something that stands out. So for example, if everybody in the class makes 90s on their test, but poor Miss Smith makes a 30, my grade would be an outlier because it does not go in the set of the data with the rest of the class. So in this case, what is the least number of pets owned? And that would be 5. Because if you read the graph, this is pets owned. So if the household owns 1 pet, so you can see there's a lot of households that own 1 pet. There's a good amount of households that own 2 pets. There's 3 households that own 3 or 4 pets, and there's only 1 household that owns 5 pets. So that's the least number of pets owned. How many people were surveyed? You'll have to count the number of X's. Okay, and you should get 20. The mode of the data is going to be 1 because that's where it shows the repetition. And the range, so you have households that own 5 pets, you have households that own 1 pet. So you take the highest minus the lowest to get the range of 4. Okay, now looking at frequency tables. A frequency table is a table used very similar to a line plot, but it's going to use intervals. Okay, these are also used to create histograms. So for example, the number of cars sold in 12 days. So that's your title. So number of cars sold in 12 days is your title. At the bottom you'll have cars because that's your interval. And off to the side you'll have frequency because that's how many are in each interval. So in creating your frequency table, your histogram, okay, in the interval 0 to 3, I had 6 cars sold. In the interval 4 to 7, I had 3 cars sold. And 8 to 11, I had 4 cars sold. You can see I didn't have any gaps in between my bars. Okay, that represents a histogram. And I even labeled the top of each of my bars to note how many are there. A stem and leaf plot. A stem and leaf is another way to show frequency of data by listing out how many entries you have in the class of numbers. So the stems are going to be your tens column and your leaves are your ones. So in other words, the left side is your stems, the right side is your leaves, because these are your ones, these are your tens. So if you create the original list of data, this here, your zeros, these are all just ones. So 3, 3, 5, 7, 8, 9. Yes, you have to write the 3's twice if you're writing the original list of data because it is written twice in your stem and leaf plot. So then you go look at the next column. So this is 0 plus 10. So 10, 2 plus 10. 12, 13, 15, 16, 16, 18, 19. Now you have your 20s. So 20, 21, 23, 23, and so on and so forth. Go ahead and finish writing your data. So now you can look and see which data point occurred the most. So looking over it, there are 23s 3 times. So that's the one that occurred the most. That's your mode. The highest value is going to be 35, or the lowest value is going to be 3. Turn the page. So let's go through and just practice listing the names. I want you to pause the video and see which ones that you can list out by yourself so far. So the first 3, the first one's a pictograph, the next one's a line graph, the third one's a histogram, the fourth one we haven't talked about, it's a scatter plot, and because from left to right it's going in a downward motion, this is a negative correlation. Whereas in number 8, it's also a scatter plot, but you notice how it's going left to right, increasing, so that is a positive correlation. 5 is a line plot, 6 is a box and whisker, because you notice it makes a box, and then it has 2 whiskers on the outside. 7 and 9 are actually bar graphs. Notice the difference between 1 and 9. Okay, 1 is a pictograph, 9 is a bar graph. "10 would be a circle graph, 11 a line graph, and 12 a bar graph because of the spaces between each of the categories. Ask your teacher if you have any questions on these types of graph.